What if the most dangerous love story ever told wasn't written in a tragedy novel? It was lived in an ordinary bedroom, in an ordinary house, on an ordinary street, where the neighbors waved good morning and had absolutely no idea. What if a woman could love someone so completely, so recklessly, so fully, and that love, instead of becoming her greatest story, became the very cage she had to escape from, one quiet night at a time? Layla was 23 when she thought she had found forever. She was 27 when she realized that forever had been slowly, deliberately taking pieces of her. Her voice, her choices, her right to simply be, night after night, in the darkness, inside what the world called a love story. This is her story, not of breaking, of rebuilding. Because what happens when a woman who was made to be silent starts building her escape in the quiet spaces between someone else's control? One folder, one conversation, one ordinary Tuesday at a time. What happens when she chooses herself? Stay with me, because this story doesn't end in tragedy. It ends in a cold March morning, an open door, and a woman who finally agreed to her own life. And I promise you, by the end, you will feel it in your chest. Let's begin. The first time Layla heard the rain against their bedroom window, she thought it was the most romantic sound in the world. She had been 23 then, newly married, wrapped inside a cream-colored duvet that still smelled like the lilies from their wedding centerpieces. She remembered pressing her ear against his chest and listening to his heartbeat like it was a song written specifically for her. She remembered thinking, "This is it. This is the life I prayed for." She had been so beautifully, catastrophically wrong. Now she was 27, and rain against the bedroom window sounded like warning. She lay perfectly still in the dark, controlling her breathing the way she had taught herself. Slow inhale through the nose, 4 counts. Exhale through parted lips without making a sound. It was a technique she had read about in a wellness article 2 years ago, designed originally for anxiety management. She had repurposed it for survival. The bedroom was dark except for the pale blue light of the digital clock on the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. She had been awake since midnight, not from insomnia, but from the particular kind of alertness that her body had developed independently of her permission. Her nervous system had become its own security system, wired to wake her before trouble arrived, rather than during it. She heard the sound of his car in the driveway. Her stomach tightened. She closed her eyes and continued breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Layla Raza had met Daniel Voss at a bookstore, the kind of meeting that sounds invented when you retell it, but was genuinely, embarrassingly perfect. She had been reaching for a novel on a high shelf, standing on her toes in her tan ankle boots, and he had simply appeared beside her and retrieved it without being asked, without performing heroism, without making it a moment. He had just handed her the book and turned back to his own browsing, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She had found that irresistible, the absence of performance. Later, she would understand that the absence of performance in that moment was itself a performance, the most calculated kind, the kind that a person executes only after years of understanding exactly what type of woman falls for effortlessness. She had been exactly that type. They dated for 8 months, 8 months that she would spend years afterward replaying, searching for the signs she missed, cataloging her own blindness with merciless precision. There were things she had dismissed as passion, his intensity when she spoke to other men at parties, the way he would go silent for entire evenings and then explain it as being overwhelmed by how much he felt for her. The small corrections he offered about her clothing, her laugh, her habit of talking too loudly when she was excited about something. She had called these things love. Her mother had called him devoted. Her best friend Priya had called him a little intense but ultimately wonderful. Nobody had called it what it was. The front door opened downstairs. Layla's eyes remained closed. She heard his footsteps on the hardwood. She had memorized the geography of his moods through sound alone. Tonight the footsteps were uneven. Not the confident, measured pace of a good evening. Not the soft, careful tread of a night when he wanted to pretend everything was fine. These were the other footsteps. She heard the refrigerator open, the clinking of glass, a pause that stretched too long. Then the stairs. She regulated her breathing. Slow, steady. She was asleep. She had been asleep for hours. She was deeply, peacefully, entirely asleep. The bedroom door opened without a knock. It had never come with a knock in 4 years of marriage. A small erasure of privacy so gradual, she hadn't noticed it disappearing until it was entirely gone. Layla. His voice was quiet. That was sometimes worse than loud. She didn't move. Layla, I know you're awake. She had made the mistake, early in their marriage, of pretending too convincingly, a slight movement, a soft, fake drowsy sound that she had thought was realistic. He had catalogued it. He had studied her the way she used to think was adoration, but was actually something colder and more deliberate. He knew the geography of her deceptions the way she knew the geography of his moods. She opened her eyes. You were out late, she said. Her voice was carefully empty of accusation. Meeting ran long. She nodded. She had stopped asking what meetings ran until 3 in the morning. The asking had once produced consequences she was still, 4 years later, working to forget. He sat on the edge of the bed. She felt the mattress shift, and her body responded before her mind could intervene, a tightening across her shoulders, a stillness that had nothing to do with sleep. You didn't call, she said, and then immediately wished she hadn't. The silence that followed was its own kind of weather. I didn't realize I needed to check in with you, he said pleasantly. There was always a pleasantness to the beginning, a surface sweetness that made her question whether she was imagining the danger beneath it. This was a particular cruelty she had taken years to name, the gaslighting that lived inside a reasonable tone of voice. You don't, she said quickly. I wasn't sure if you wanted dinner kept warm. It's 3 in the morning, Layla. Right. She adjusted her position against the pillow, creating the impression of ease she did not feel. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Why wouldn't I be okay? This was the labyrinth. She knew its walls by heart now, the way every path of conversation looped back to a place where she was somehow the unreasonable one, the anxious one, the one who never trusted him, the one who made everything into something. She had spent 3 years walking this labyrinth and had never once found the exit, because the exit didn't exist. The labyrinth was the point. No reason, she said. He looked at her in the dark for a moment that lasted too long and not long enough simultaneously. Then he stood and walked to the bathroom and closed the door. Layla turned her face toward the window. The rain was still falling. She breathed. 4 counts in. She had tried to tell Priya once, approximately 14 months into her marriage, on a Tuesday afternoon when they had met for coffee, and Layla had arrived wearing a long-sleeved blouse in the middle of August. She hadn't told Priya everything. She had told her a version, a carefully edited, softened, contextualized version, in which she presented the facts and then immediately provided his defense for them. He gets like this when work is stressful. I know it sounds bad, but I think I provoked it. He's not always like this, that's the thing. Most of the time, he's the person I married. Priya had listened. Her eyes had moved to the sleeve of the blouse and stayed there for a moment too long. Layla, she had said carefully. Are you? I'm fine, Layla had said, quickly. The way you say something when you've practiced saying it so many times that it comes out automatically. The way breathing comes out automatically. The way flinching comes out automatically. Priya had reached across the table and covered Layla's hand with her own. You can tell me, she had said softly, and Layla had felt, for one terrible, luminous moment, the very real possibility of telling, of opening her mouth and letting out the weight she had been carrying so silently for so long that she had begun to confuse the weight with her own body, had begun to believe that this heaviness was simply who she was now, had forgotten that she had once been a person who laughed too loudly at parties, and talked with her hands, and reached for books on high shelves without anyone's help. "I'm really okay," Layla had said, and she had taken her hand back, and she had changed the subject, and she had driven home and sat in the parking garage for 11 minutes before going inside, because she needed to rearrange her face into something that wouldn't provoke a question she wasn't allowed to answer honestly. The bathroom door opened. She heard him move around the bedroom, the rustle of clothing, the nightstand drawer, the familiar choreography of the end of a night. The bed shifted as he lay down. Silence. Then, "Come here." 2 words, quiet. An instruction wearing the clothing of an invitation. This was the part she hadn't agreed to. Not specifically, not this version of it, not this hollow, mandatory closeness that lived inside the architecture of what was supposed to be love. She had agreed to partnership. She had agreed to building something together, to being someone's person, to the beautiful, ordinary intimacy of sharing a life with another human being. She had not agreed to this. She had not agreed to the calculation of every response. She had not agreed to the performance of willingness she did not feel. She had not agreed to shrinking herself so completely that some nights she lay awake wondering whether there was anything left of her that was still genuinely, originally, authentically Layla. She moved toward him in the dark because the alternative required a courage she was still in the process of assembling, quietly, secretly, in the spaces between his attention. The way you build something important when no one is watching. What he didn't know, what she had been carefully, painstakingly protecting for 7 weeks, was the folder. It lived on her phone inside an app that looked like a calculator. The kind of hiding place that required a specific 4-digit code to access, a code she had chosen because it was the birthday of the version of herself she was trying to recover. Inside the folder lived documentation, dates, times, photographs she had taken in bathroom mirrors with trembling hands and then hidden with the determined practicality of a woman who had finally, quietly, decided that her silence had an expiration date. She had found a lawyer through a women's resource center whose number she had memorized without writing it down, calling from the parking lot of a grocery store while the engine ran and her heart ran faster. She had spoken to Priya, really spoken, not the edited version, not the softened, contextualized version, on a Sunday afternoon 3 weeks ago, on a park bench, in a conversation that had lasted 2 hours and ended with Priya's arms around her and Layla's face against her friend's shoulder, crying the kind of tears that come out when something that has been held underwater for a very long time is finally allowed to surface. She was building her exit the way she had learned to do everything inside this marriage, quietly, carefully, invisibly, one small, deliberate piece at a time. She lay in the dark beside him and listened to his breathing slow toward sleep. The rain was still falling against the window, she thought, as she thought every night in these still, suspended hours, about the woman she was before this. The woman who had opinions about restaurants and wore bright colors and called her mother back within the hour, and had never once in her life monitored the sound of her own footsteps for fear of disturbing someone. That woman was still there. She had checked, carefully, in the quiet moments, in the grocery store parking lot, on the park bench with Priya's arms around her, in the bathroom mirror at 4 a.m. when the folder was open on her phone and she was building her evidence and her future simultaneously. That woman was still there, not diminished, not destroyed, only held very still for safekeeping, while the other parts of Layla did what needed to be done. His breathing deepened. She waited. Then, very slowly, she turned her face back toward the window. The rain was falling, and she watched it, and she counted the weeks. Not the weeks she had endured, though those lived in her too, but the weeks remaining. 4 weeks. The lease on the small apartment was signed. Priya had the spare key. The lawyer's number was memorized. The folder was full. She had agreed to love once, with her whole reckless heart. She had not agreed to this. And the difference between those two things, the distance between what she had chosen and what had been imposed upon her night after night in the darkness, was exactly the distance she intended to travel. 4 weeks, she breathed, 4 counts in. The rain fell. And somewhere beneath the silence and the stillness and the years of carefully managed invisibility, Layla Raza, the real one, the loud one, the one who reached for things on high shelves without waiting for permission, was waking up. The morning she left, it was not raining. It was an ordinary Tuesday in early March, the kind of morning that doesn't announce itself as significant, that looks identical to every other morning until you're standing in it and realize that this particular Tuesday is the one you will measure the rest of your life from. She had her bag. She had her folder. She had Priya's car idling at the corner, 2 blocks away, because they had planned even the geography of this, the distance, the timing, the route that didn't require her to pass places he might be. She stood in the kitchen for a moment before she walked out. She looked at the window above the sink, the one that faced east and filled the kitchen with the particular gold of early morning light. She had always loved that window. She had stood at that window hundreds of times washing dishes and watching the neighborhood wake up and carrying the strange grief of loving something about a place that was also hurting her. She picked up her bag. She walked out. The door closed behind her with the quietest, most ordinary sound. Not a slam, not a declaration, just a small, definitive click. And she stood on the front step for exactly 3 seconds, breathing the cold March air, feeling the specific sensation of a woman who has just stepped out of one version of her life and into the first moment of an entirely different one. Then she walked down the path. Then she walked around the corner. Then she was in Priya's car, and Priya was driving, and neither of them said anything for a full 2 minutes, because some moments are too important for words, and they had always, even before all of this, understood each other in the spaces between speaking. Then Priya reached over and squeezed her hand. "You okay?" she asked. Layla considered the question with genuine honesty for the first time in 4 years. "Not yet," she said, "but I'm going to be." She turned her face toward the passenger window. The world was moving past her, ordinary, unheroic, Tuesday morning world, and it had never looked so entirely, breathtakingly possible. She hadn't agreed to what she had endured, but she had agreed to this, to the cold March air, and Priya's steady hands on the wheel, and the small apartment with the spare key, and the first morning of a life she was choosing deliberately, with full knowledge, with both eyes open. She had agreed to this, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Night After Night is not simply a story about suffering. It is a story about the extraordinary, quiet, almost invisible architecture of survival and reclamation. Layla's journey reflects the reality of countless women who enter love with open hearts and find themselves navigating something they were never warned about, never prepared for, and never consented to. Her strength does not live in a single dramatic moment of rebellion. It lives in the folder on her phone, in the conversation on the park bench, in the memorized phone number, in the 4-count breath at 3 in the morning. The most powerful message this story carries is this: endurance is not acceptance, silence is not surrender, and leaving, when leaving is the hardest thing imaginable, is not weakness. It is the most profound, self-honoring act of love a person can offer themselves. Layla's story ends not with rescue, but with self-rescue, which is the only ending that belongs entirely to her. For every woman reading this who recognizes something of themselves in these pages, you are not alone, you are not imaginary, and you are not without a way forward. Your silence has an expiration date. Your story is not finished. And the door, when you are ready, is there.